Good evening and welcome to this special Melbourne Symphony Orchestra event live from the Iwaki Auditorium in Melbourne's South Bank. My name is Steele Foster and I'm Senior Manager of Learning and Engagement at MSO. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we gather on, the people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge the many lands and traditional owners from which you join us online. I'm excited for the progress towards reconciliation. Our future is shared and will be better and more vibrant for it. Tonight is the final event in this year's Melbourne Music Summit, an exciting panel discussion, the place of performing arts organisations in schools. This discussion will be led by MSO's Creative Chair for Learning and Engagement, Dr. Anita Collins. The Melbourne Music Summit is supported by the Erica Foundation and the Department of Education and Training through the Strategic Partnerships Program. This event is also part of MSO's Music and Ideas series. Thank you to Crown Resorts and Packer Family Foundations and the City of Melbourne for their support. I'm sure you're eager for the conversation to begin, but we're excited to hear from you too. So please add your comments and questions to the live chat on YouTube, and we'll try and answer as many as possible later on. We're also very excited to announce that the MSO for Schools 2023 season is now officially launched. Information will be sent to all schools over coming days, and you can find out about the live performances, workshops and open rehearsals on the MSO website. We're very glad to be able to announce that thanks to generous support, we're able to offer schools programs at a discounted ticket price of $9, as we believe access to great music should be accessible to everyone. In addition to this, there is further financial support available to schools where there is need. More information is available online. It's now my great delight to open the floor to our panel and Dr. Anita Collins.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. I am very excited that this is our final event and I know you've had a couple of incredible days, which has been great. I'm very used to being in one of those seats, which is fantastic. And I have a lot of fun and I love panels because it's good discussion. So being in this seat is very different for me. You're going to have to stop me from answering my own questions if you can. But I'm very excited because this topic to me is very exciting. It's this whole idea of where do our wonderful arts organisations and particularly our music organisations sit within the experience for school-aged children. And I would really like to have that discussion on a big scale, understanding what's possible but also what we should be doing. So let me introduce the panel. First of all, we have Zoe Wrinkle. I've met Zoe this evening. She's a performing musician of over 25 years with experience in live music, theatre, TV and studio recording. What's exciting to me is she sat down, the first thing she said was, my mum's name is Anita. And there's not many Anitas around, so we always love meeting each other, even if we meet them through somebody else. Zoe is creative producer and arts learning specialist at the creative learning team at the Arts Centre Melbourne, and loves working with artists, arts organisations to design and deliver meaningful learning programs for schools, young people and emerging artists. So can we please welcome Zoe? Thank you. Next down the line we have Ingrid Martin. She is a conductor and so much more, and I will absolutely happily say that every time I see Ingrid, I fangirl. She's my person that I fangirl. Being a conductor of concert bands, school concert bands, when I get to watch her work with young musicians, it is a masterclass every time I see her do that. So I'm going to try and keep my fangirling to a minimum, but I just wanted to put that out there. She has also, in 2022, debuted with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and the Tasmanian Symphony Orchestra and continues to be the artistic director and conductor of the Crosswinds Ensemble, Victorian Youth Symphony Orchestra and the Bayside Chamber Orchestra. She also has an incredible presence online and she helps educators everywhere with her conductingartistry.com. So could we please welcome Ingrid? Next we have Steph Urity. Oh, I was practicing. I haven't got it to check that I would do it right. And I love in her bio, she says she's a curator of arts experiences for children. And this concept of curation, I think, is absolutely amazing. I've got to meet Steph for the first time this evening, and I'm very excited to hear what she does, because at the moment she's the program manager for the Art, Play and Signal creative programs, which engage children, families and young people for the City of Melbourne. She leads an amazing team which provides high quality and accessible and innovative creative programs for and by children, for families, young people and young emerging artists. Can we please welcome Steph? Finally, on the end, we have John Nolan, who many of you will know, and he is currently the MSO's Director of Programming from 2021, and that followed 2 years of being the Director of Learning and Engagement, which is where I first came in contact with John. When I was trying to write down some words to describe John, I came up with this. I said, he is a musician, a curator and a visionary in arts programming and management. How does that sit with you? And I say that because having worked with him, we get to have these very deep and amazing conversations about where does the MSO sit within sort of everything that's offered, both within Victoria but around Australia, and that leads to bigger conversations as well. So I'm very excited to have John. Can we please welcome him? So the advertised theme or topic we were going to look at is the place of arts organisations in schools. And I was thinking about it in my drive-in and going, I like it, but I think it can be more. So what I'd really like to get into today is a conversation around exactly that, but let's broaden it a bit and talk about the place and purpose of music organisations in particular in education for school-age students. And that can be anything. So this is where I want to dive into and see what comes out of it for this evening. So Zoe, I'm going to start with you. And then you're all going to jump in. What do you believe is unique or different or special about what music organisations offer to school-age children?
Probably one of my favourite things about working with music organisations and bringing them to schools is that it puts artists directly in front of young people and brings them just that wealth of knowledge that artists have, the excitement around meeting an artist, and it doesn't have to be someone well known, it's just someone as a practicing artist is like mind-blowing for a child to be in their presence. So that's one really exciting part of it. And then that can kind of grow into mentorships and really teach young people the pathways to become professional musicians. There's also, let's be frank, the arts are really underfunded in the school system. So having music and arts organisations being able to provide extracurricular or curriculum-aligned programs is really, really important to support what might be lacking in some schools.
Yeah. And I think many of you would agree with that. Any other, what's unique, something special, something different?
I think another thing that bringing artists and students together is what that also does for the artists, because there's something amazing about that look on a child's face when they get inspired and engaged meeting a real live artist for the first time, that I think can really rekindle that passion in the artist to see that the depth of impact that art can have on a young person's life. And that's only evidenced when you talk to the artists about what was their experience when they were at school. And they'll say, oh, well, I had a group came to my school, or I remember the first time I saw this orchestra. And it's really can be such a pivotal moment for that artist when they were young, and then being part of that themselves at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. Steph or John?
Yeah, look, what's fantastic is that music organisations and independent artists as well, they can bring a really different approach. That I would imagine that in most schools it's quite a traditional instrument-based kind of technique-based teaching kind of program, and there are so many other ways that we can work with children and music and sound making. And artists often come with those really interesting approaches. So whether it's using, graphic scores, using storytelling, making their own instruments. And I also love what Ingrid just mentioned about artists also learning from children, and that's a big part of what we do at Art Play. It's very much about a playful exchange between the artist and the child, and the artist and the child co-creating together. So yeah, what artists can bring is that basically that introducing that creative process that they use within their own sort of creative teams and bringing children on board in that process, and then together creating original music and original soundscapes can be so empowering for the children and the artists, and when the children get to do that and then perform it as well, like it's just so empowering for the children to be able to see, you know, what they can create and alongside professional artists.
And truly understanding that, you know, they are artists as well, they're just on a different part
Exactly,
of their journey through
exactly.
that. Yeah. John, any thoughts?
Well, I agree with everything that's already been said. I suppose as well, I think, you know, we can perhaps, in a more powerful way than other options, we can create that inspiration moment, you know, that moment where the kid enters Hamer Hall for the first time, or whatever venue, and goes, wow, and then the orchestra plays and they go, wow, you know, and that's the start of that hopefully lifelong journey. Or it's also when it could be a quartet in the school library kind of thing, it's still a moment, that inspiration moment. Yeah, that's what I'd add.
I think I love listening to kids as they talk about what they've seen, especially when they enter into a professional venue, and I think that's a really important, moment when they walk in and see how big it is and how many people are there. But I still remember, and I've shared this many times, but I asked a kid coming out of an orchestral concert who got to speak to a musician and got really close to the musician and their double bass, and you know, they got to pluck it a bit and play it, and it was great. And I said, how was that? And he went, it was great. That person wasn't a robot. So this whole concept that these people they see on stage and this sort of thing actually were robots, and this child truly believed that. And it demystified that to say, no, this is a real person and you can be on that journey as well. I was wondering, I have two questions that go together. I'm really interested how you might jump in on these. What role should music organisations play in school music? But also, let's replace the word should with could. What should they do and what could they do, and what might be the difference between those? And I'm going to throw to John first, which is going to be a real doozy for him.
What should or could? I think this is the big question, I think, and I feel like this is one that our learning and engagement team is constantly grappling with, and it feels to me a little bit like there's no sort of one single set answer. You know, it's something that will always be evolving and change. We'll always be trying things and looking for the optimal way to engage with schools. Say the question again.
What should or could music organisations, what role could they play for school-age children?
Yeah, well, and I feel, I suppose I speak from the sort of MSO perspective largely, but I feel like we are sort of at our best when we are, an orchestra. And I think as an orchestra we can, as I say, provide that inspiration moment. But we can also, through events like this, provide sort of support and complement the amazing work that teachers do. We also do programs where we are in schools and are providing sort of weekly lessons, but we can't really do that at scale. And we want to be an orchestra for all of Victoria, and we can't do that for all. It's hard for us to do that for all of Victoria. Yeah. So finding these ways to sort of complement and support what teachers do is, I think, one of the things we can do.
And I'm imagining that shifts and changes with the shifting and changing needs of teachers as well. So
exactly.
It struck me when you said before that we want to get it optimal and perfect, but then the situation changes and you have to shift again.
Well, and then a global pandemic comes along and everything changes again. And then, exactly. And I do, if you look at our schools program, it's not the same from year to year. We're always trying to find the thing that will work best for schools, the thing that's going to appeal most to teachers and students. Yeah. And of course, it changes state to state. It changes on. Well, yes,
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Totally context based as well.
What about everyone else on the panel? Should, could, what role could they play?
I think arts organisations generally, and certainly music organisations, provide an opportunity for young people to see their own backgrounds and stories reflected on stage, and it's really important for their sense of citizenship, I guess, and you know, contribution to society that lives behind them and in front of them, and realising that they have a voice and they're allowed to get up on stage and share their stories. And they might not realise that unless cultural organisations are stepping in and saying, look at all of these amazing people with these amazing stories, and they get to do them in these big, huge venues, or they come to your school and do them. It doesn't really matter. We're just, you know, sharing something that you know about yourself, and that can be really validating for a child.
Absolutely. I have a question rolling around in my head. I don't know how to phrase it, but something like, how are we going with that? Like, where are we at on the journey of showing all of those different stories and all of those different pathways and identification of self in there?
I think
That's
we're
a big question.
getting better. I think we're getting better.
Yeah.
I mean, we're certainly not there, but yeah, we're getting better at it, and teachers are very supportive of hearing those different stories. I mean, I'm obviously just talking from Arts Centre Melbourne perspective, but we have a fairly diverse program, and we're making an effort to make it even more diverse all the time. And the feedback that we get from performances where students have seen their stories shared is just so powerful, and it's really exciting for us, and I guess, yeah, hopefully we're staying on the right track.
Yeah, it sounds like it's front of mind in your planning and thinking.
Absolutely.
And I think, yeah. What do we go back to the question? Should, could?
I think one of the challenges for arts organisations is you can't be everything to everybody. And so the question is really, what is the thing that only we as this particular organisation can do that is a unique and valuable offering for whoever the children are that we're doing it for? And so, you know, John mentioned, well, we're best as an orchestra. So how can MSO give the best orchestra experience to students across Victoria? Or if it's a chamber music organisation, how can we give the best chamber experience? Or if it's a creative experience, how can we give the best, you know, compositional soundscape, you know, playing experience? And so I think if organisations can really be clear about what their purpose is and what they can do best with the resources that they have, then it's much easier to deliver a really quality product and experience for students, rather than things being diffuse and thinking, oh, we'd love to do this thing, but they're not really part of the core of what makes the identity of that organisation or that ensemble. And so thinking about what is the most us thing that we can give to students, because we're so lucky here in Australia. There are so many amazing performing arts organisations that have education programs. So if we can let each place have their space to do their thing, then students are going to have access to this whole smorgasbord of amazing things that are done at the highest level.
I have this sense that because of the nature of what we've just gone through in the past 2 years, that almost every arts organisation is reassessing, recalibrating, re-understanding, you know, what students need, what teachers need, what is their particular thing that they're fantastic at, and what other things maybe shouldn't be offered anymore or don't serve the purpose that they originally designed for. I think that's my sense of what's going on as well. What about for you, Steph?
Yeah, I think we sort of touched on it before, but having those inspiration moments and taking children, you know, maybe outside of their school environment in terms of the, you know, the should or could, I'm not sure which one it falls into, but you know, sometimes children being in a new environment can really be inspiring, and maybe where they're not engaging in school in a traditional environment, suddenly they're in this new environment, they're working with artists, or they're seeing a performance, or you know, they're in a new space, and it can really engage children in a new way. So that's something that I think is really important to keep in mind in this discussion.
Just an offhanded question: how important is it, do you think, for students to come into a professional performance space, whatever that might look like? Is it very important? Is it mildly important?
I mean, I think, and I was just thinking this at the end there, that you know, there's a lot of these organisations, there's tremendous public investment locked up in them. You know, we're not, you know, gone into them. Yeah. And so there is a great responsibility to make sure that is as open as possible to as many different bits of our community as possible. And schools are obviously a big bit of that community. So actually, in a sense, I think that's probably the biggest could and should, is making sure there's as few barriers as possible for teachers, whether they be generalist or specialist, private, public, secondary, whatever, to be able to feel that they can come to us and to come into those, you know, our amazing halls and hear this incredible resource we have of 88 professional full-time musicians, or whatever incredible resource other organisations might have. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, because it strikes me as something that we've lost for the past 2 years, not being able to have kids come out,
absolutely,
go to venues, and even now it's tentative and all those sorts of things. And it's an interesting thing for me. What if those kids lost that opportunity to have in terms of coming into a space? Yes, hearing amazing musicians, amazing music, and having amazing experiences, but the spaces we sort of came away from.
It's also understanding that in Arts Centre Melbourne's case, it's owned by the state, and that means that they own it. So kids are just like blown away when they come into our spaces sometimes, and they're like, oh, I didn't know I was allowed to be here, is kind of the feeling. And just to let them know, well, actually, this is yours, and you can do whatever you want here. Like, you could come and write a show and do it up there if you want. Like, that's really expands what they think that they can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the students. What about for the teachers?
I think there's different values, like students coming into a venue. Again, it makes it real that there are people that are practicing artists that do this, that this is people's jobs, and this is where people work, is on an enormous stage or in a gallery or whatever kind of art they're engaging with, and that's a special experience. And then there's also that experience of having people come in where that is possible. That's something different again, because that enlivens that school space with a different sense of possibility than what they have in the sort of routine humdrum of every day that they're at school, that they go, oh, well, this happened on that stage at school or in my classroom. Oh, like maybe I could be more creative in this space than I had dreamed before. So I think both experiences bring different values.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is. I loved what you said about this is yours, you know, and it's true of these organisations. These are yours, and I think there are a lot of adults who don't, might feel that Arts Centre Melbourne or the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra or whatever aren't theirs. It's, oh, that's not for me. So actually getting in really young and getting that idea that you own this is yours, is, I think,
well, that's vital. It. I think we have to be quite active about it, because there are absolutely barriers to participation. Totally. So, we can't just expect that people think that they can walk in and feel like they own it, but encouraging that, I think, is really important.
And there's a really delicate balance of, there are implicit rules about how you behave or what you do when you come into these places, which can be just as intimidating.
Yes.
As just the big space and the gold doors and all those sorts of things that are there. So it strikes me as such an interesting balance to create a situation where it's comfortable to come in, not just into the space, but into what the expectations are in the space as well.
Yes.
And I know that constantly has to be changing as well.
When we're talking about space, when in terms of art play, what we've learnt over the years, we've had researchers as well studying this, but what they've come back to us to say is the thing that teachers and the children really love is how much of a transformative space it is. So, being schools collaborating with a music or arts organisation, those organisations can bring all these skills to the space. So whether that's lighting, whether that's installation, and using all the different kinds of arts as well as the music to engage can really be a transformative experience.
And it's kind of looking at every space as an art space, depending on what you put in it, how you treat it,
exactly,
how you behave within it. Yeah, all of those sorts of things.
So many options.
Yeah. Again, I love curveballs. Should we have a national approach to how and why music organisations, interact with school-age children, with teachers?
I think you should answer this question.
Well, I put it out there because there's just been the announcement about, continuation with looking at, a cultural policy for Australia. That's a new thing. Should we have this national approach? I guess there's a should we have one? If we did, what would it look like? I don't know. Should there be something that's across the board? And one of the reasons I think of it, John was mentioning the other night, he said, it used to be that to have artists to come from overseas, organisations would get together and say, well, we'll have them for this concert and this concert and this concert, and makes it worth them coming over. Is that part of the national approach which is already being done, or is it more about what's the place and purpose for music organisations for school students? So I'm throwing that one open. It might go nowhere, but let's see.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think, policy does make a difference, and if that can be written down and supported by government, then it can, and then supported with funding that goes with it,
very closely
of course.
Yeah.
Then that really empowers the schools and empowers the arts organisations and music organisations to be able to do their best to deliver what they do best. But it's I think in terms of it should be a framework. It shouldn't be like every school must do this X, Y, Z, but it should be a framework that holds those organisations and the schools in terms of giving them the support to be able to really embed music programs in schools and do it in a way that suits those individual schools, and using innovative approaches, different approaches for different schools. It's kind of like having a menu that you can select from with all the research that sort of backs it up, because I think, there's been a lot of research about how amazing music programs are in schools, how arts programs can change students' lives. So, having that research backing and having that support would be just amazing.
But also I think, along the lines of what Ingrid was saying, still leaving the space as well for each organisation to be itself, be its truest self. Yeah, but yes, agreed.
Yeah.
And each, every state is different and has a completely different system of how music education works within schools. So a national approach would have to be flexible enough to work within all of those different constraints. But I think, throwing it open in a big, well, what's the dream that we could have of, if every child could engage with an arts organisation once a year, that would be an amazing thing to say nationally, this is what we're committing to, we're putting the funding behind this. And, hopefully then across the period of their schooling, they're having 13 amazing experiences that would hopefully be really diverse and across all sorts of different art forms that would help students, I think, really understand that art can be a part of your life every day. That's beyond, I've got my headphones in and I'm
listening to my music.
I'm listening to my music, or I'm on YouTube, or I'm gaming or whatever, but that art is for everyone all the time. And making that a normalised idea, I think, would be a great start.
Yeah, let's talk about art like we talk about sport. That'd be amazing.
Yeah,
every weekend I go to the gallery.
Yeah, and I think it's that sort of, how can we talk about it as that national or big umbrella approach, but speak about it as what the students get, what opportunities they get, and then how does that look for kids in regional areas, how does it look in remote areas, how does it look for all different groups of students, so that they do all have the same experience no matter which state they're in and no matter what school system they happen to be enrolled in at the time. Okay, tick, done. Let's have one of those, thanks very much. What do you find are the most frustrating or the greatest barriers to, and this could be from your organisation's perspective or a broader thing that you're seeing about, delivering music to school-aged students, however that looks? What are some of the frustrations or the barriers that you've seen and are experiencing at the moment?
Marketing to schools is really difficult. It's just hard to get the information in front of the right teacher. Yeah, but we work really hard at getting the word out. So I'm sure teachers are hit with so many offers constantly. So yeah, just hitting the right person at the right time is really difficult.
Do you have a sense of why a teacher would take up one of the programs, say, that was offered versus one that would definitely not? Do you have any sense of what might be the things that are driving them?
There's a few things, I think. We are in a fortunate position like the MSO where we can offer subsidised tickets. That helps. We can also offer transport subsidies. That's a big help. And we just try and make our programs, the way we advertise them and build resources around them, as easy as possible for teachers to be able to book, because there's quite a process for getting approval internally and making the booking. So if we can make things just as simple as possible, so that we're not putting too much work onto the teacher, that helps. I mean, that's not talking about programming at all, but that kind of administrative burden, if we can take that on their behalf, that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that what you've kind of alluded to is the challenge of what teachers face every day. And that I think one of the things that would make the difference between do you say yes to a program or do you say no is do I have time to do this thing? And all we know about the myriad demands that are on teachers and overworked and underpaid and all of that. And even though they're absolutely passionate about the students getting that amazing experience, it's really easy for that thing that's going to take me half an hour or an hour, plus all the back and forth with my principal or my administrative team, and I've got to book a bus, even if it's subsidised,
Write a risk assessment.
and I've got to do all of the paperwork for the parents, and the parents don't send back the consent forms, and all of that stuff. Like, it's a huge undertaking for a teacher to, say, organise an excursion, and you might be the teacher that is in your school not in the position to action something like that, and not feel like you have the sort of power to say yes to something, even though you really might want your students to do that. So I think one of the challenges is for the organisations, really understanding the teacher's experience, and like you said, trying to make it as easy as possible for the teachers to say yes and push go, and whether that's the most simple Google form or type form that they can just go click yes, I'm done, or even having a pro forma letter that they could forward to the principal to say, here's the reasons that says why we should do this program. They don't have to come up with all of that information themselves, and helping someone else higher up just be able to say, yes, that sounds good. How can I help you book the bus?
Yeah, exactly.
Or in this national policy that we're going to have, every school should have someone in the school that actually looks after that. So the teachers don't have to, that it's someone's job to actually be the arts coordinator that does that admin and makes those things happen, because holding those relationships with, whether it's Arts Centre Melbourne or MSO, teachers at the moment don't have the resources to have the brain space to kind of hold the relationship, develop the partnership, plan for the programming so that it can be really meaningful for their school. So, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a coordinator at each school in Australia that can hold that?
Bringing those coordinators together so that they can be the ones that can actually go back to the school with all the messaging and all the information to go, look, here are all the things that are on offer. I think this year would be great to do this, and this would follow on from this unit, and That coordination, and it's not just for the arts, it could be for all the other things that go on in schools, shouldn't fall on teachers and could fall on someone else that could make it a richer educational experience for the students. Excellent.
Just for the arts.
Number one. Okay, just for the arts. Number one. This is what we need in every school.
We've got enough support for sport.
But maybe it's the maths Olympiad, bus or something. I think this idea of coordination is great, and maybe it's even there's a business opportunity for someone who's watching to kind of contract out this is a service that they provide, or the other sort of lower cost, thinking about our very expensive national plan that we've devised, would be even just having a national repository where the responsibility is back on the arts organisations, that there was a centralised website that would only take a few people to run as opposed to all the coordinators in the whole of Australia, that has a listing of all of the organisations and programs that are available with an updated contact point of a name of a person and a phone number and an email. Because I think that's the other thing is in schools and in organisations, people turn over. So the person that might have held that relationship, they go, that organisational knowledge is lost, and then they don't know, oh, it's XYZ at Art Play that I've got to call to, you know, organise that thing.
And there's so much of the experience is based on that relationship, but also someone who's willing to do that extra half an hour or whatever, and so the students can experience it. When that person moves on or goes somewhere else, it's actually the students who lose out in the end. And I think, so much of it has to be thinking about their experience. What do you think, John? What are you going to add to the national plan?
I'm the wrong person to ask, but I mean, I totally agree with everything that's been said. I'm not an educator. I've never taught in a classroom or anything like that, but from what we hear, it's very clear that teachers are under just extraordinary amounts of pressure. I think I was in a meeting earlier this week where someone said teachers don't even have time to Google at the moment.
It's very true.
And it seems that the pandemic has just made that worse. And I think there's a bit of a sense that there's kind of 2 years of teaching to be caught up on almost, you know. So yeah, massive barrier in terms of teacher time. Cost is still such a huge barrier, and I think it's easy for us to forget that a $9 ticket times 30 children, plus a bus, plus the teacher you've got to book to cover things back at the school because the teacher's got to come on the excursion, it's suddenly a very expensive proposition. So there's still more work to be done around cost, I think, even though there's, you know, we're trying. There's still more work to be done. And then I think on our side, it's, you know, in this post, or whatever this is, not post-pandemic, in this current reality, we're all exhausted, and all organisations, not just schools and teachers, are under immense stress. And you know, some weeks we've had to replace 9 musicians in the orchestra because of illness, and that takes a toll right across the organisation. So trying to maintain really high quality programs and trying to, you know, keep all these things moving along is hard for everyone at the moment.
Has that impacted on? I just thought of a sort of an additional question, which is the idea of the frustration or barriers around the value of what music organisations provide, as perceived by schools, whether that be teachers, parents, school leadership, students themselves. Is there a value barrier? Is there a frustration, do you think? And has that changed over the last 2 years?
Value as in a principal just might not understand.
I guess valuing whatever they're being offered, to take the half an hour and the time and the extra thing to go, yep, we're going to do this because it is going to be valuable for our students.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually where, you know, like the conversation we were having on Monday, that this is where all that advocacy stuff is so important, and all those tools like that you know, the pro forma letter to give your principal, all those things are so important. Absolutely.
What do you guys think about the value idea?
I think that, well, just anecdotally from teachers coming to visit us, they're really motivated to get their kids out of the classroom. Homeschooling has had a huge impact on kids' social interaction. So, you know, we've been fortunate to have been funded by the Department of Education to have some free events for schools, and the uptake on that has been really amazing. And we were told no curriculum links. This is all about fun and getting kids just out and having a good time and being together. And teachers have really been up for that.
Yeah, how refreshing and wonderful is it to go, it's about fun, it's not about ticking a whole bunch of curriculum outcomes.
And obviously having the department backing that really enhances that value.
Yeah, and it is such a unique experience here in Victoria. I mean, we've had lockdowns everywhere, but Victoria has had a very unique experience, which might not be showing its results just yet. So the idea that I was just saying, it needs to be fun, it needs to bring back that joy for the students is so vital.
We had exactly the same. We did set of schools concerts earlier this year, and for the first time we didn't even introduce the instruments at the start of the concert. It was just pure fun. It was total fun storytelling, and we've never had such positive feedback. You know, there were sort of some resources, but they certainly weren't curriculum linked. It was just fun, and it sold, like I think we had 7,000 students through the doors in 2 days. And yeah, the feedback was extraordinary, which, you know, is exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
So maybe now that is one of the unique things about that first question, is what's unique is reintroducing joy and fun in a very visceral kind of way that's very important for kids to experience. My last question before we go to some questions from online, this is just blue sky, you know, if given this opportunity, what would you do? If you were given all the money, time and support in the world, what would either your arts organisation or music organisation want to do? What would you want to do if you're going to take over the world? That's kind of the idea. I'm throwing it out there. All the time, money and support in the world.
I think we'd want a bit of give and take, I guess. Not give and take, but like working together with schools and young people to develop work, like really extending that sort of mentorship and putting artists in front of students that I was talking about at the beginning into creating work and touring it and connecting, not just metro going out, regional coming in, regional to regional. Just sharing and connecting.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be cool to do, like, between all of those different communities, and like you were talking about,
Yes.
you know, the diversity of voices being represented, but also, you know, each community within Victoria and Australia has its own unique identity, and getting those to come together and kids to meet other kids from other backgrounds and other places and making something together, that would be amazing.
And then making something is the conduit between that connection that they would be able to feel. Yeah, let's do that.
And kind of embedding those programs into schools. So, like I love your idea, Ingrid. Before you were saying, you know, having schools being able to experience different kinds of arts or music organisations, you know, throughout their school life, but also, you know, as part of that. You know, maybe having some pilot programs and then schools kind of seeing, okay, this particular music organisation works best for our school, and then building a partnership over, you know, 3 or 5 years. So it kind of becomes like a culture of a school, and they kind of really, it just becomes integral to the school, like having music at the school and having sound making at the school and doing it in a way that works for that community, I think would be really cool.
I think there's something great about, for kids, expectation of something that they see the older kids do, and they know that that's coming up for them, that they really look forward to, and I go, oh, when I'm in year 9, I know that I get to do the XYZ thing. So that could be a part of that sort of journey of creation and that long-term relationship.
Yeah, great. And if we're going really blue sky dreaming, like, you know, also, you know, exchanges regional to city, but also then, you know, internationally, you know, because we have all this amazing, one silver lining of this pandemic is we have learnt to use technology, you know, in amazing ways. And, you know, at Art Play recently, we've had this international collaboration, which probably wouldn't have happened if the pandemic hadn't happened. So we're working with an arts organisation in South Korea, and connecting children live via Zoom and via doing live video, and you know, you could do it with music as well. So, you know, having children virtually in the room together and being able to have that creative exchange as well, you know, would be pretty amazing as well, just in terms of opening children's minds to different cultures from around the world as well.
All the time, money and support in the world. John, what would you do?
Mine's maybe a bit dull compared to some of these, but I'd just love it if every Victorian school student could come and see MSO at least twice before they finish school. Every single one of them. As you know, I think that would be pretty great. And then sustained and sequential music education in every school.
Just as a, you know,
just on the side over there. I'm just not sure that we could provide that, even with all the time and money in the world.
You never know. You never know. Part of me, I would love to have every student and every teacher. And I know that seems strange to put teachers in there too, but to meaningfully learn a musical instrument. And so that they could come to any of these things, or they experience any of these things, and they have a true deep appreciation of music making, musical learning. So that, it's a roundabout different kind of way of doing it, but it's educating almost the consumers so that they understand more about, you know, the value of what's available for music, from our amazing music organisations everywhere.
We can throw the parents and the grandparents in there too.
Just fine.
They can learn an instrument as well.
Everybody. Thank you so much. I think, Steele, do we have some good questions from online?
We do have a couple of questions I'd like to throw out. So, one of them is around the balance between sort of the big mass audience experience, I know we've touched on this a little bit, versus those kind of really small personal connections where you're in a school, and how that balance might be best struck.
I mean, I think there's an element of this is around the each organisation being its true self. We're at our best at the big scale kind of activity, but there are other organisations who are absolutely sensational at that small scale in school activity as well.
It strikes me as not an either or.
Yeah.
Then kids need both. They need to, because when you get the small groups in schools, it changes that perspective of this is where I have assembly and I sing the national anthem, versus this is where I see some performers and I can get up really close to them. But then the large experience in a venue, if it can be, and if not, having that large experience brought to them in a space that is a little bit different. So why should we choose? Let's have it all.
Yeah.
Have it all for everybody.
Exactly.
And then it also, gives children in schools, this is in the ideal world, but, they can work with organisations like the MSO, but then they can also work with small independent organisations, and they can work with independent artists as well.
Yeah.
And they all bring different experiences to the schools. And
It also shows different pathways for the students, doesn't it? It's like there's different ways of doing this, whichever one suits you the best, and that becomes about that individual experience.
Yeah, and hopefully it can include, both, co-creating with artists. It can include, seeing an amazing professional performance. So all the different sort of layers as well of engagement.
Yeah, that like listening, creating, responding.
Yeah.
They get bits of those in all of those different small scale or large scale contexts.
Yeah, we have one particular program called Stories in the Wall, which has been running for a number of years, where we send playwrights who are independent artists out into primary schools, and they work with the students to create their own plays, radio plays, and then the students come into Arts Centre Melbourne to record their stories, and they come and see a performance in the Playhouse or the State Theatre while they're there, so it gets both sides. And then we send off their recordings to tertiary students who do the sound design and music for it, and we publish the finished pieces online. So they get to see their own work end-to-end delivery, work with independent artists, and see, be in the venue as well.
Yeah,
So,
that journey through all the different parts of it.
Yes, yeah.
Amazing.
All right. The other one is around advocacy for kind of the school music education, and what the place is for these organisations in that.
Steele's looking at me. I'm going to pass it to you. I won't say anything because this is my beef.
I think you should answer.
Everyone hears me rabbit on about advocacy all the time.
Anita, what is the place of music organisations in?
I think it's a, from my perspective, it's a really interesting, advocacy is really interesting because it's not the same formula everywhere. So, and it's very much not the same formula at the moment after 2 years of kids having had a different experience. I know the way I would advocate in Queensland would be wildly different to how I would do it in Victoria or in Western Australia. And I think for me it's helping someone understand what the value of the opportunity is they're being provided, but it also means starting with the person where they are. What do you understand about what these kids are about to experience and what the values are of that, and starting from there and then figuring out how to get them to the point that as an educator particularly, but also with students and parents, they understand the value of what they're getting, not just what they see. Because I think when we sit down as an audience member, we become an audience member and it becomes entertain me, versus this is actually an experience where I'm going to learn a lot more through that. So I think it's different everywhere, and I think it's about us who are working in this space understanding what it's like to not be in this space and then speaking in a way that will help them understand. That's my 2 cents. But
Yeah, I think it's about putting ourselves in the shoes of whoever our audience is and thinking about what are their needs in terms of advocacy, because even every individual person you talk to, like you said, is going to have a different level of knowledge or understanding about the value of what we do, and you can apply that on that individual level, but also, well, this school has this understanding of advocacy, or this area or this type of school that, you know, if we need to, I think as our organisations, be really aware of the differentiation within our audiences and what they require to be able to get that message to their people in the most effective way.
Absolutely. I think I had an experience with a principal where he was showing me around his school and he was very proud. And he was like showing me all the different spaces, and music's big in our school, you know, every child sings, everyone, they all learn music. And I went into this music lesson, and from my perspective, it was chaos. There wasn't a lot of actual music learning going on. And I said, but I stopped for a moment and said, what does he see? And then I said, you know, tell me what you understand about what you're looking at. And he said, they're smiling, they're laughing, they're having fun, therefore it's really good music education. And I thought, great, I know where we're starting, because part of it was getting him, I was viewing one thing and going, this is chaos and there's not much learning going on, but he was viewing it as a powerful learning experience, and how do I help him get to the point of seeing a little bit more clearly about what's going on, but what's happening for an educational reason. So it's simple questions like that.
Yeah, and I think music and arts organisation, another thing we can do in the background is like continue to partner with universities and researchers to document what we're doing and have those research reports coming out to support what we do and explain what we do. And I think maybe sometimes it's also, maybe there's a missing role somewhere though between the research paper and translating that.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm not sure whose role that is, but I feel like that's something that I've sort of experienced over the years, that that's a bit of a gap. So we need that translation to happen between research paper and then talking to you know, everyone that
plain
we work
language.
with.
Plain language.
Dot points, that's what it means. Yeah, I agree.
Less than 4 syllables per word, please.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the questions we had from online. I wonder if there's any questions in the room.
Zoe, you talked earlier about wanting to give visitors to Arts Centre Melbourne a sense of ownership. You said you want them to feel like they could get up there, they could create something, perform in that space. And John, you talked about the inspiration moment. What can arts organisations and what can schools do to make sure that these interactions are inspiration moments and not intimidation moments, particularly with large peak performance organisations? How do we make sure that the message for students isn't, I need to be really smart, or I need to be really creative, or maybe I need to be really rich or even really white to do this? How do we make sure it's inspiration, not intimidation?
Yeah, it's so many things. Every aspect of their visit needs to be welcoming, from, you know, the person who's at the door saying hi, to the performance itself. What's programmed? Who are they seeing on stage? What else? Giving them the opportunity to have a say with, you know, ask them what they think about the performance, have some ownership over what they're seeing. What else? It's all of the things.
It's all of the things. it's all of the things. And I think though it does sort of come back to the fun thing as well.
Yeah.
You know, just this idea that this isn't a sacred space where you come and have a liturgical experience. You know,
Yeah.
this is your place where fun is fine. And I think one of the things that I always find really funny is I think teachers might prep their kids for a visit to the MSO by telling them you've got to be on your best behaviour.
Yeah.
And actually, they don't have to be on their best behaviour. And like, we're going to start putting it in the sort of pre-concert information. You know, no, it's fine. Make the noise, scream and clap, and talk back to the presenter. That's what we want.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I went to a schools concert in Carnegie Hall. So, Americans are wild. And it was 2,000 grade 3 kids in this concert, and the noise was out of control.
You're like penguins.
It was so loud, and by the end of it, all of the kids were up and dancing. So that's what we need to do, I think.
I think part of it is also the reaction. I'm thinking of a particular experience I had. The reaction we have as the performers to accepting something. So we had some young players from Goulburn on stage with the Canberra Symphony Orchestra string players, and they performed this commissioned work, and it was fantastic. We came off stage and we heard this sound from the auditorium, and I was lucky enough to conduct the work. So I'd turned around and I'd clocked this guy who was right in the front row, which is really odd. When you've got a whole 2,000 seat theatre, you don't sit in the front row right in the middle, but he was right in the front row beaming. And I figured he was someone's dad. And as I came off, I heard this sound, and this man had stood up, and he was blown away by what his son had experienced, but also seeing these performers. And he was of Maori background, and he did the haka. And it was loud, and it was wild, and it was not in place for the venue. But we all had to stop for a second and go, oh, what's he doing? Don't walk. We all came back onto stage, and we all stood and we experienced what he was saying thank you for in the way that he was saying it. So having those moments of going, it's okay to it's just a space, and we're the ones who make the space, and we made it. That was an important thing. So I think having that experience is being open to that is really important too.
I was going to say, I think what you've touched on is the role of the artists in being part of an exchange, that it's not a one-way experience of the artists giving something or putting something out there toward the students, but as we've said, the students are involved and that it's interactive. But even something as simple as the artists appreciating the applause of the students and smiling on stage, which can be harder sometimes than other times to get that to happen. But that creates a completely different atmosphere of it being welcoming and the people looking like they want to be there. As opposed to, I just really want to get to my lunch break or whatever it is. But that sense of everyone in the organisation, everyone who's on stage, being on board about what this is for and being appreciative that somehow all these teachers got these students here in this room and they're having this special experience, and that, we can receive their thanks with, a heartfelt feeling.
I think if it's all right, there's no better place to end than on that. Thank you very much, Ingrid. And thank you very much for being open to lots of different questions and thinking big, but also thinking about, what is the value that we bring at the moment and what can we do. So thank you very much. And can we thank our panel?
And that brings us to the end of tonight's event and the Melbourne Music Summit for 2022. We've been glad to bring you the workshops, discussions and masterclasses with leading educators and members of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. I'd like to thank Anita and our panel, John, Ingrid, Steph and Zoe, for their insights this evening. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for the Melbourne Music Summit and the Music and Ideas series, without whom this week's events would not have been possible. The Erica Foundation, Department of Education and Training, MSO's development partner Berry Street, the City of Melbourne, the Crown Resort and Packer Family Foundations. And of course, thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.